Cognitive analytic therapy is a time-limited psychotherapy that can be useful for a wide range of difficulties. Cognitive analytic therapy invites the client to be very active in the process of change.
Having CAT for me was daunting. I was quite nervous about what it might bring.
You were never sure on your own whether you were ever going to come out the other side of things, but when I was in the therapy I was able to kind of have somebody else there to tell me that I would come out the other side. It was like having someone hold your hand walking down like a really rocky path.
In the initial stages of the therapy, the therapist will be asking lots of questions about the client's life to build up a picture of the difficulties that the client wants to focus on and an understanding of how it is that those difficulties have come about in that person's life. The analytic side of the CAT therapy helps the therapist and the client to explore together relationships and the relationship patterns that the client may have found themselves in, both historically and currently. So in CAT, we would map out the patterns that we might get into of managing difficulty in our lives, and we would use that map as a focus for the therapy that we do together.
So using a CAT map was the first time I have had a way of visually putting down some of the problems I was experiencing, and that map has stayed with me to be able to remind myself of old habits. If I get into a difficult period.
The mind maps that we used were particularly helpful, I think. I remember having a conversation at one point towards the end of my therapy, where I was talking about a situation I'd been in and how I'd handled it, and my therapist saying to me, well, you've just embodied and done all the things that we've been talking about for the last 6 months, and I didn't know I'd done it. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was an internalisation of something that we had been using, like a visualisation.
I'm able to find that as a grounding thing to go back to. It's been one of the most long-lasting pieces of that therapy.
The therapist would also typically write the client a letter fairly early on in the therapy, which gives a narrative about how that person may have experienced the difficulties that they're currently dealing with, and offer a focus for the therapy and hopefully an empathic and warm way of understanding how it is that that person has come to be experiencing the things that they're experiencing in this moment.
The letter writing in this therapy was so new, to have your therapist write you a letter about yourself. My first return letter is quite raw. I can see that I'm using expletives. It's not in no way a formal letter. It's more of a, I don't know how to respond to this. It's so new to me, but I will do it somehow.
And then at the end of the therapy, the therapist will write a goodbye letter summarising the work that's been done and summarising some of the things that the client has developed that they may want to remember after the end of the therapy. The client is also invited to write the therapist a goodbye letter.
Involved quite a lot of self-reflection and being prepared to really scrutinise myself, but in an environment which was safe and offered to me as a safe space in which to do that, with constant reassurance as well about why I was doing it and what I was hoping to achieve at the end of it.
The most challenging thing in the therapy was trying to find the root cause of my behaviour or the root cause of my thoughts. I had never been challenged in that way before, to look so deeply into those elements of myself. It was really challenging.
Accepting what somebody else had to offer in terms of their opinion and view of me, and listening to what they thought of me and not listening to my internal voice and my internal narrative was challenging.
I had to stick with it in order to get the benefits.
In CAT, the therapist is not pretending to be some kind of expert that has everything sorted out and has all the answers ready to deliver to the client. On the contrary, the therapist is trying to sit alongside the client to help create the conditions for the client to discover for themselves some of the responses to the difficulties that they're experiencing.
It was life-changing. The thing that always stays with me, and I have always managed to hold on to through all sorts of situations now, which life hasn't been a plain sailing since the therapy finished, but it has been much better from the choices I made. But my centre, find my centre. And it was something that we talked about a lot when I was in therapy, and about finding that sense of self. And it wasn't the sense of self that lived in chaos and spun off into different orbits and was substance abusing and in destructive relationships. It was a real sense of me as the person I truly am, and as the person who I was having therapy with saw me as well.
Having that feeling of having something concrete to take away with you.
Finding that centre, keeping that sense of self always at the forefront of my mind, and going back to that when I need to. You absolutely have to be at a point where you are willing to accept the help, and to accept that you need the help, that you can't keep fixing everything by yourself. For a long time I thought I could keep fixing it by myself and it would just carry on the way it was. And that wasn't the case. I couldn't keep fixing it alone.
Be open to it. Be as open as you can. Trust in the therapist. Trust in the process. And do your best to stick to the programme, but most importantly, be kind to yourself and let the process happen. If you can go into it wholeheartedly and with as much self-kindness as possible, and a safety blanket to take if needed, then I think that's the best advice I could pass on.
If you think that cognitive analytic therapy is something that might benefit you, then do feel free to talk to your GP or the clinician working with you about whether this might be an appropriate intervention for you.